I'd like to call the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded, and I can see that there's no one else recording the meeting, so if you please join me in the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I can also see that there are no citizens' comments.
So you have a student.
We will move right on to special recognitions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to bring to your attention, as you know, in addition to two commendation schools, Packagug and Auburn High School, Julie Bancroft was named a National Blue Ribbon School for closing achievement gaps. And the event that was held to celebrate this was at Chuck's Steakhouse. And just wanted to recognize the many businesses in Auburn and the surrounding communities that supported in some way or another the celebration for the JV team. So Chuck's Steakhouse provided the venue for the event. Masterman's provided the printing of the jackets and funding for the jackets of staff. The Auburn Industrial Development Corporation, the Auburn Industrial Park, provided funds for the jackets. Hanover Theater actually was host to the entire JV students and faculty for the Nutcracker, and that was a week ago on Monday. Southbridge Savings Bank provided funds for the event at Chuck's Steakhouse. BJ's Wholesale Club provided the cake for the JB and Bryn Mawr staff, as well as for the event. And the District 1 PTO, they organized the event, and as Mrs. Lopez noted, for their ongoing support in programs for both JB and Bryn Mawr School. And then also wanted to note, and included in your packet, Congressman McGovern actually had reached out, I think I had shared with you, with both Mrs. Lopez and myself, to congratulate the school and the district, and actually had this put into the Congressional Record, Volume 160, number 137, from November 12th, just recognized the Julie Bancroft School. So I wanted to thank all of those people for recognizing JB.
Any questions, comments? I would just like to say it was great to see the show of support, and I mentioned it at the tree lighting the other night. The way the community comes together for things like this, they're always supportive, and it's not like we have to go begging for it. They usually come knocking on our door to help us out, and it's much appreciated. What a great event that was.
It was. I agree.
We now move on to the student representatives report.
Taylor couldn't make it again tonight, so it'll just be me. There's a couple things going on at the school. The National Honor Society just recently created their list of students that help shovel for senior citizens. So there's like an ongoing roster of kids that they can call if they need their like driveway shoveled after a snowstorm. We've also started sending out the care packages that we've been making for soldiers. We had about 19 or 20 in total, and we're mailing them out as we speak right now. And the National Honor Society is having a field trip next Friday to the Boston Aquarium, so that's pretty cool. And then our International Club is having a field trip this Thursday to this Peabody Essex Museum. It's like in the Salem area. It's like an old like Asian building that was restored and brought over, like a building that was brought over here from China. And then so sports are on their way. The first indoor track meet is next Wednesday. Basketball teams have had a couple scrimmages already in this official season starting next week, I believe. And that's about it. Not much has changed in the last like 3 days.
What about track practice? How'd that go?
Yeah, track practices, we're getting it done.
All right, good. Perfect.
Good.
All right, well, thank you for that report. Well done. I would now seek approval of the minutes of December 3rd. Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from December 3rd.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
There's a vote. We now move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to remind you, tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, Mr. Kazanovich will host the budget kickoff as part of the Finance Committee meeting. I will be in attendance, and I will share with you what I learned from that meeting. I also just wanted to, it piggybacks on what John has just shared about the National Honor Society students and shoveling for senior citizens, which is great. I was not aware of that. But as I labeled on here, our ongoing commitment to the community, As you had said, Mr. Scobie, the community is very quick to step up and support us, the schools, whenever we need or ask for anything, which is wonderful. But I'm also proud of the schools and the way that we take seriously our responsibility to give back to the community. At this time of year, there are schools, we have adopted a family here ourselves from central office, whether it's adopting families through Auburn Youth and Family Services to try and make their holidays brighter, if it's doing the snow shoveling, the community service that our students do, collecting things throughout the year. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware of those things. I think it's really important that we do that. And I think it's a great lesson and a message, not only for our students, but for ourselves as reminders too.
Absolutely. Excellent. And that's it for,
It is.
we're going to move on to unfinished business.
So I'm very excited to share with you, I included in your packet the notification that has gone home to our current second, third, and fourth grade students, since they will be the first group of students to occupy what we refer to as 10 Swanson Road, the current middle school, once it is refurbished for elementary. We have put together this notice that actually is due in this Friday, December 12th, where each student has the ability to present a name or the name that they believe this school should take. And we've worked closely, Dr. Lozay and I, with Mrs. Kozik, Mrs. Lopez, as well as with Mrs. Chamberlain and Mrs. Chase, because they've got these second grade students. And ultimately what will happen, it'll be a couple of tiers. So each class will come up with their favorite one, and then by grade. So we'll actually have 6 names, hopefully for the January 7th meeting, if not the 21st. For a subcommittee to review if that's the way you choose to do it, and we will be able to have a new name for it instead of referring to it as 10 Swanson Road.
That would be great.
Which would be great.
Any comments, questions? I will say that unofficially, I've heard some names that involved worms and digging and bugs and fish and snakes and squids, so I don't know if those are gonna make it this far. Again, that's unofficial.
Yes.
Well, based on our tour Monday, I fully expect to have something about Santa on the shelf or something, some kind of name, because they were so taken up with that. Oh, they were so cute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Wayne?
I just want to say it's great to have the students involved in this too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good.
Hopefully they come up with something legitimate.
I don't know about the ones you said.
Yeah.
All right.
That's exciting, so. A couple of updates. The school building committee has not yet met since we had our meeting last week. Both school building and the master plan team will meet next week on Tuesday, a week from this evening. So I will provide updates at our next meeting, but I can tell you that forward progress continues to be made on both fronts. So we're in good shape. The next item I do want to share with you, and I have them here, I will pass them around. Copies of the various budget reduction scenarios as you have requested. So I'm going to walk you through those and answer any questions that you may have. As part of that, I actually placed as part of the packet, you had requested some comparative data regarding the area schools. And if you remember last year, the school committee set the area schools for us to use as comparisons regarding guidance counselors, psychologists, and team chairs. So if I refer to this document first before the budget reduction scenarios, just so you can see, so it's got the number of guidance counselors, and then we broke it out because it's important to see each school in the area obviously has different student enrollment numbers by elementary, middle, and high school. So I'm happy to answer that. It's an awful lot of data I know here, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have tonight, or at our next meeting, I can certainly do so as well.
It is a lot of data, even looking at it earlier in the week. Did you see anything that kind of, I don't know, I would say any schools that are similar in size to ours with the numbers that we're looking for as far as guidance support?
Yeah, so if I look at, because we're looking for guidance as well as a school psychologist. So as I looked at there's none that are exact to us, but if we compare to Grafton, for example, we currently, right now, have 2 school psychologists in the Auburn Public Schools, one for elementary and one for secondary. They have 5 that they use there, which is more than, actually, I would say, more than the average that we would see. Again, we're a little closer to them in terms of the number of team chairs. We have 1 each at the high school and middle school, and then 1 that's shared between JV and Bryn Mawr and PAC and Mary D, and that would change next year. 1 would stay at 10 Swanson, and 1 would be shared between the primary, and they have 5 there as well.
Through the chair.
Yep.
Question just about the adjustment. Can you define what you mean by adjustment? Is that proposed but not approved yet, or?
No, so through the chair, that's a great question. There are 2 terms and certifications for people who serve as counselors. Guidance counselors, while they do some counseling certainly of students, it's generally more around the academic realm. They do provide some support for children. The adjustment counselor really is more leaning towards a social worker
Okay.
issue in terms of probably some deeper challenges that a child might have. So just difference in terminology.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So it really varies, the structure that they have. Now, if we compare to Leicester, which has, about 700 students less than us, in terms of school psychologists, they have 4, and we have 2. In terms of team chairs, we've got the same number, 4 and 4. Again, they've got, about 700 students less than we do. So there really wasn't an easy way to make a one-to-one comparison, except I would be comfortable saying we are certainly not overstaffed in these
Right.
areas, is what I'm very
Absolutely.
happy to say. And we're very happy to be able to report that, that is what came out very clearly.
No, I have
Yeah.
trouble making comparisons with this,
Yeah.
even though I was the one that asked for it. But it's based on the demographic of each town as well.
Mhm.
We don't know
It
what the
is.
makeup of these
Absolutely.
towns are.
Correct.
I'm surprised that Grafton needs that much support, frankly.
Mhm. I mean, I think it's, different models, the way that they structure it. But what I can say, if you remember last year, it may even have been the year before, Sally D'Arcangelo and myself from Auburn Youth, we had met with a group of schools. It was more the Shrewsburys, the Northborough, Southborough, Algonquin, I think Grafton may have been there. It was Senator Michael Moore who was proposing some legislation to try and get some funding for an additional behavioral support persons to be able to share. Just as I'm sure you read, the mental health challenges that some of our younger and younger students are facing really require more support at a much younger age than we would have seen before. So I think that this data speaks to that, and districts attempt to really try and provide as much intensive support as they can during the school day.
Through the chair?
Yes.
So are we're looking for an additional psychologist for the elementary, so there'd be 2
Correct.
at the elementary,
Yes,
and we'd have the one that, because there's more testing and things like that.
correct.
Are we looking for any additional team chairs?
There
No.
are not requests for that in the budget. There
Okay.
is, though, if I may, through the chair, in terms of guidance counselor, there is a request we currently have a half-time one at the high school. There's a request to have that go to full-time, an adjustment counselor. And there is a request for one at Auburn Middle School. We currently have 2 there. So those are the requests.
I will say that this is obviously driven by need, and the problem a lot of times is that if the teachers are spending too much time taking care of some of these kids who need a little bit of extra help or need a half a day to be tended to make them feel a little bit better about themselves and get through the day, then that's taking time off of the other 24 students. And I'm sure
Right.
we had this discussion, I think, last year about this time when we were touring the schools.
Right, exactly.
And what a toll it was taking.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
certainly, I'm not trying to scrutinize these numbers.
Yep.
If the administrators and leadership is saying that that's what we need, then I do believe them. I just wanted to get a look at
Sure.
what was going on around us. Wayne?
You feel that it is adequate?
I think that, what we have proposed in the budget, I think is very warranted. So to look for an additional school psychologist and the guidance support, I think the guidance support in particular, and I will say, to answer both of your questions, Mrs. Holloway and Mr. Page, more testing typically happens at the younger grades, and that actually makes sense for us to try and identify challenges that children are having earlier, so we can provide support so that they eventually can become more independent. So to have 2 at elementary is certainly not excessive in things. You will see in our budget reduction scenarios, we talked a lot about this as a leadership team, it's all about priorities and trying to find the priorities that are going to best address the largest number of students' needs overall. But I think that we have additional needs that can be supported, yes.
Well, my comment was related to that you feel comfortable with what you have in the budget.
Oh, I do.
There's something that, like George was just explaining, we want to
Yeah.
make sure that we have enough to cover.
Right,
You know, if somebody needs extra help and
Right.
then we lose on 24 other kids, then
right.
that's what I was
So,
referring to.
yes, so my apologies, so.
That's fine. That's fine.
The budget that we put forward definitely includes needs that we as a leadership team have identified that we need to support
Thank you.
our kids, yes.
So as a
absolutely.
district, then this would be a top priority.
It is, I mean, and you're actually will see in the budget reduction scenarios that even though it is a top priority, in order for us to get down to what you'll see will be a 2% increase, we actually start chipping away at some of those priorities for new positions.
Oh, okay.
It does do that, yeah.
Well, hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Right, exactly. So looking then at this document here, for those of you new on the committee, what we do is, this very first column lists the current budget as has been presented to you. So the $23,881,807, which represents a 3.92% increase. And then we go through and make reductions. So if we stay with column B, if you follow that down to the bottom, we've made additional cuts that get us down to a 3.36% increase, right on the bottom of the second page. And then the cuts are cumulative. So whatever was in column B is added to what's in column C, and then ultimately we get down to the lowest reduction scenario that we've put together. But if I can just walk you through these. So column B, after discussions with Mr. Barber and Mr. Fahey, as Mr. Fahey had indicated when he did his presentation, we generally start off each year, unless we have solid information to the contrary, at $4 a gallon for oil. Since that time, and remember we drafted this budget back in October, since that time, and Mr. Barber and Mr. Fahey looked recently, they'll actually get on December 18th, the bids from French River. But based on what homes are paying, $3 is a safe number. We hope we get a better number than that, but certainly at $3 a gallon, we feel very comfortable. So in column B, as you go through for each school, we reduce the oil amount to reflect $3 a gallon. So for example, at Bryn Mawr School, that's a $10,000 savings there. Basically, it's 10,000 gallons, so $1 a gallon. We then went through, so all you'll see in column B are just a couple of items. The reduction of oil to $3 a gallon, and then we went through and level funded the supply requests in any school that had not already done so. And that was again about a consistency and an equity issue. It was not large money at all.
For the chair, you just mean paper, like copy paper, pencil, whatever you're.
Correct. Exactly, yes. The other piece of information, if you fold it up onto the top, you'll see where it says Auburn Middle School. One other area we were able to reduce is the value of $8,650 that you had seen in the first pass-through for library books for the new Auburn Middle School. Based on the SBC's approval at their November meeting, they agreed to increase the amount for our FF&E, our furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So that means we can take it out of our operating, and we'll be able to use those funds for that. So that's almost a $9,000 savings that we realized there. So those were the only cuts made. Again, it was to level fund to this current year. And then if you get down to the very bottom page, we looked at what we had set aside for contractual obligations, and also legal fees. That's a level funded value. And with the contractual obligations, we felt comfortable that we could reduce that value by 50,000. So-
No, I'm lost.
Okay?
We're on page 3?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome. So what you see there is we made reductions of $129,036. So that reduced the total budget request. Instead of the $23,881,807, it's now a $23,752,771 request, which represents 3.36%. So that's one that I would say on behalf of Mr. Barber and myself and the leadership team, that we're very comfortable recommending those reductions to you.
Are there any, Dorothy?
Okay, I have another question, just in terms of the music and fine arts classroom supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, can you elaborate on why we're?
So,
doing that?
sure, through the chair, that's with us going back and level funding whatever values were approved for this current school year.
Oh, okay.
So that's all part of that. So
Also
any of
level
those supply lines, we did that same thing too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Scenario 1? No.
So in terms of tier 2, column C, what you see is that there are no additional recommended reductions for Bryn Mawr or 10 Swanson Road. But this column actually here, column C, the only changes, and we noted those in red. So if we look at Mary D. Stone on page 1, in the first column we reduced the oil, as we did all other schools, from $3, from 4 down to 3. That saved $8,000. But if you remember, in the first pass-through, we had set aside $40,300 to maintain Mary D. Stone. That's heating, some other smaller utilities, as well as some small maintenance costs. And then the same for Julia Bancroft. That one actually totaled, it's like $21,900. I think that maybe need to be an 8. I would offer, and I agree that it's important that there be money in a budget to support Julia Bancroft and Mary D. Stone once they're returned to the town. I think, and as I've shared previously, I will not recommend, it's a vote of the school committee, when to do that. I will recommend that you not do that until we know for certain that Auburn Middle School is on track, and everything is right now, and that 10 Swanson Road is ready.
Right.
Because what we don't want to do is be left without a school for
Yeah.
our students and things.
Right.
So I would anticipate, though, in all likelihood, that by July, or at the very latest in August, that I'd be able to make that recommendation with great confidence, knowing where we stand with everything. And I would argue that, while it needs to be reflected somewhere, I don't know that it needs to be reflected as an increase in the school's budget. But, I mean, it needs to be there somewhere. So what we did in this column here, for column C, if we remove just those two values, still leave it in our budget, but have it not reflect in the increase.
Okay.
So that would actually reflect a 3.13% increase.
Wayne?
Excuse me, just back up a little bit. I want to ask you about the oil. I noticed oil is taking a super big dip. Matter of fact, I only paid $2.71 today, and I don't think that's happened in 10 years. But is that going to reflect on your bidding for next week, or is that just through the chair to?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, through the chair, basically what we're looking for is when we receive the actual proposals from the FREC, they're going to allow for us to have an identifier factor of which vendor we would basically be able to receive those respective quotes from. Right now, what we use is the quote prices respectively on residential properties anyways, to be able to reduce our current rates, knowing that usually the commercial, because of the quantity of how many gallons of oil you require is going to be much higher, would usually allow for us to have a much lower rate anyways. And historically, looking at the past 2 years, part of the evaluation that Mr. Fahey and I had completed prior to identifying these potential reductions, we took those items into consideration as well. And knowing that we have been previously just over $3 per gallon, and that was when the rates were actually at a relatively higher rate than what they are right now. So with all those items being presented, we're with relatively very high confidence that $3 would be a very reasonable rate, assuming that that's even on a little bit of the high side, considering the residentials right now. Acquiring, I think I reached through approximately 12 different vendors of what their rates were. Two specific that identified the highest rates at currently $3.04 and $3.09 for their particular two. And then everyone else was literally under $3 in the $2.70 to $2.90 perspective. So with all those rates taken into consideration, we're very confident that we would be at that $3 rate for the commercial side.
Thank you.
One additional thing I would note to add to what Mr. Barber had said is, with the bid happening on December 18th, if we find that we get a rate better than the $3, we still have time to reduce it further if we had that. But $3, as Mr. Barber said, is where we feel comfortable right now. We're hopeful it could even go lower.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No.
Okay, so column D, the tier 3 cuts, is where you start to see some reduction of some new positions that were requested. So reductions that you note here, if you recall, Bryn Mawr and Packagug, currently Bryn Mawr and Mary D., had requested a media/tech specialist that would be shared. So that would not be funded in the column D scenario. Additionally, if you look on to the next page, if you flip it upside down, in Tier 3, we would also save funding by transferring a high school teacher to the middle school to replace a retiree. In looking at the class size numbers with Mr. Hanfield as well as Mr. Gagnon, we feel confident that we could still maintain appropriate class sizes at the high school and transfer an individual to the middle school. So those actually total, if you go down to the bottom of page 3, that total is actually the $99,696,000 cuts from column D, which when added to column B and C, that's a cumulative cut of $280,432, which gets us down to the 2.7% increase.
Any questions, comments?
Question through the chair. Is that the only specialist that Bryn Mawr and Mary D. asked for?
In terms of a specialist, I believe, so they're part of the elementary group that's looked for school psychologists. So that does remain in the budget, the school psychologist for elementary. As we had our discussions when we met again on Friday afternoon, yes, thank you. What we did is we actually broke up into teams that we had representatives from the district level, secondary, and elementary to really talk about, because each principal, it's a dual role that they need to play, because they need to advocate for the positions in their school, and then they also need to step back, and we need to look at the whole in terms of what positions are the ones that, not that any are less important, but will have an even greater impact. Our thinking on this position, just 2 years ago, the only library media specialist we had in the district was at the high school. We just added one for the middle school this current year, so our thinking was to bring one to 10 Swanson Road, hopefully, next school year, and then the following year or soon thereafter to do it for the primary school. So that was the thinking around that position. But and I would say to you, they're challenging discussions to have, because each principal, each member of the leadership team puts together a budget that he or she believes is what is needed to run their building successfully and to have us continue to move forward. So then for us to be thinking about, so they advocate for these and then say, okay, well, I'm not going to get it, but it's about juggling priorities. So that's really where it comes from.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead, Chris.
Under column D, so if we're eliminating the media tech specialists, let's say at Bryn Mawr and PAC, if we follow that column, then that also includes reducing, sending the high school teacher to the middle school. In other words, it's a package.
It's a package, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And through the chair, in the past, these have been, and we've done this each year, the recommendations. Now, when I go to the budget kickoff tomorrow night, maybe Mr. Kazanovich is going to tell us that a 3% increase is what we'll all get. I don't expect that's what he'll say, but he could. So once we get some direction, and as we continue these discussions, and these discussions typically go through March and April, and we wait and see what comes from the State House, that there have been times when the committee has said, I can agree with this, this, and this, but I really want this to be the priority. So there's plenty of time. You don't have to necessarily take it in columns. This is just the leadership's team
Oh,
recommendation.
all right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Does not need to be all or nothing.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
I have a question. When we talk about taking the teacher from the high school and moving them to the middle school to replace that position, what's happening at the high school? What is going to be affected by that? Obviously, if we don't cut that person, they're not just going to be sitting there in the teacher's room all day. So what are they?
Right. So what it would do is, and there's within a couple of departments that we've looked at. So we're always looking at class size, and we do it based off of now. If we were to take a teacher from the high school, say for example, I'll use social studies as an example, which is not the one we're talking about here. By removing a teacher, it would, in other classes that teacher would teach, it's going to raise the class sizes there. But I would say that we're comfortable, if we have to make these cuts, that would be an area where those class sizes could still be at a reasonable level at the high school with the transfer.
Okay.
May not be ideal, but they'd still be reasonable.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else on that, Dorothy?
Well, actually, it's on another item that's actually in column B, but it is.
Go ahead.
It's just about the inclusion IAs being replaced by the teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you comment a little bit more on that?
Sure, so that's in column E?
Or sorry, D. So we're still in column D. Sorry, we were in column D, then we jumped to column C, then we.
Okay.
I'm coming back to.
So actually, I'll go right through column E
Okay.
right now. Yeah, perfect.
Or, oh,
Yeah,
yes,
it's actually under
E,
E, yeah.
yes.
Apologies.
That's okay. So having said what I just stated about the library media specialist, what happens in column 4, should we need to get to a 2.26% increase, the media tech specialist would be eliminated from 10 Swanson Road. If we follow on to the next page, we would reduce, so Mr. Hanfield currently has, Auburn High School currently has 3 guidance counselors and 1.5 adjustment counselors. He's requested to go to 2. Saving $18,000 would reduce that request, so instead of having a 1.0 or 2 adjustment counselors, they would have 1.7 FTEs, adjustment counselors. In terms of the next cut, one of the requests for Auburn High School is to add a special education teacher. They currently have 3 special education teachers there. The idea would be to add a 4th one, so that there would be, in effect, 1 per grade. But in order to do that, we would reduce 2 of the inclusion assistants, the instructional assistants at the high school, to really offset the cost of that. So bringing in a teacher and eliminating 2 of the support positions. The next cut in Tier 3 would be to eliminate the assistant ice hockey coach stipend. Tier 4, column E, thank you. And therefore, in total from Tier 4, column E, is an additional $100,982 in cuts, for a total of $381,414 in cuts to our original request, which has us at a 2.26% increase.
Any questions, comments? None?
And then lastly, in column F, Tier 5, to get to a 2.01% increase over FY15. As you can see, there really is nothing left to be taken from the elementary. So we look to Auburn Middle School. Instead of them getting an additional guidance counselors has been requested. It would be cut down to 0.4, which equates to about 2 days a week, or it could be 4 half-days, however it would be structured.
And try to find someone to do that, too.
Right. For Auburn High School, it would reduce, so it would be an additional 0.1, which would be a half-day, and that's what we have used this individual for this year to support. We're required to have some support for parenting or pregnant teens, and this would allow her to continue to do that. We do look to cut an additional instructional assistant, and again, that ties with column E, tier 4, regarding reduction of IAs at the high school. And then it would be the reduction, the elimination, I should say, of the lacrosse program. So in total, that would be an additional $57,500 in cuts, for total cuts of $438,914 to get us to a 2.01% increase.
Any comments, questions?
I'd just like to say thank you for the work that you put into this.
You're welcome, I will share that with the leadership.
So, if I could ask, so from here, you go to the meeting tomorrow, and get some feeling for what the town is thinking?
Correct.
And then we put that in perspective with what we're looking at here?
Right, and then typically what would happen, so when if I may, through the chair, would come back at our next meeting, which will be January 7th, and we'll share the input from Mr. Kazanovich and the Finance Committee. Hopefully, we'll have some additional numbers regarding the oil. What has happened in the past with the school committee is we always meet the deadline of the second Monday in January, but the school committee in the past anyway has directed that a memo be drafted to Mr. Kazanovich and Ms. Jacobson that says, this is our draft budget. We have reduction scenarios. We're willing to revisit the budget should needs arise. But it's so early in Auburn that it's done. We won't have the governor's numbers. I think actually a new governor, if I understand it correctly, doesn't have to submit his budget until March 4th, I think. Hopefully we'll get that much sooner than that. But it's very early in the process, so we need to have a firm number. We've always worked really well with the town to try and come to an agreement. But until we go to town meeting, which is typically is it the second Tuesday in May, I think. So it's an item that has stayed on the agenda every meeting in the past for discussions.
Wayne?
I'd just like to say for at least the new members, is that even when they do come out with their budget, that does not mean we have to go by what they say. You know,
The
if they
town.
say 3% and we want to go 3.6, that's what we go for.
Right.
And then town meeting makes a decision which way they want to go with it. I
And
just wanna make
we
sure
would
you
then
remember.
stress why we want the extra amount of money, I would assume.
Well, yeah,
Explain to them that-
oh, yeah, well,
Yeah.
the superintendent would do a thing at town meeting anyway,
Okay.
presentation, and let the people know exactly why we need that money.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? I just have one. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. I'm going back to, we were talking about the possibility of turning the buildings, the old buildings, over to the town middle of the summer. What exactly is that going to entail? Is it us just taking a vote and signing a paper? Is it another joint meeting of some sort? What kind of process are we looking at?
So, Ms. Jacobson and I have had some discussions, Mr. Barber may have been there too, with Mr. Kazanovich. So we are looking into that to be sure that there's a detailed plan in place. I've not had experience in doing this, Ms. Jacobson has when she worked in Worcester. But, you know, it is fairly straightforward that you would say you're turning it back to the town. I think it's great that there's an elementary reuse subcommittee, that's an advisory group that's going to be starting soon. You know, the master plan team has been giving guidance to the school committee along the way. That's where the idea that we may not need JB and Mary D as educational facilities first originated from that group. So we're working to get all of that very detailed. So we'll have that in an upcoming meeting.
Okay, and to follow up on that, with the reuse committee, I don't want to tell them how to run their affairs, but I would like to request that we receive copies of the meetings of their minutes. And when I say we,
That's a good
I'm
question.
talking about Board of Selectmen, School Committee, and Finance Committee, just so we can be kept abreast as things move along. I don't know how often they plan on meeting, but what I don't want is a couple of their members or a couple of our members sharing information with us from the meetings, and then someone else feeling like they're left out in the cold.
Mhm.
So if we could just put a request forward for, just so that we're updated, as frequent as they meet.
Sure. Be
That
happy to
it's
share
all
that.
inclusive.
Absolutely.
Any other comments on that? Questions? That's all you have, Dr. Bruno?
It is, it
All right,
is.
well, we now move on to new business.
Under new business, we have, as I shared with you, many holiday concerts. Our first actually will take place tomorrow at the Packagug School, and they run throughout each of the schools over the next week and a half. And also just want to thank the school committee, if I may, through the chair, and all of the schools. We had a great tour of the schools yesterday. I think everyone enjoyed it. I know the staff and administration were very appreciative that you came and lent your support, so thank you.
Wayne?
I'd like to thank the other members and the new members that went too, because it's a learning experience. I mean, I've gone for a few years, but every time you go there, it's different. It's a different atmosphere, and you can see the growing from one school to the other school and how they cooperate together and make it work for the school system. It makes you very proud to know how well it's working and to see it for yourself.
Yeah, that's great,
Thank you.
It really was a treat, and it was nice to see, basically, everyone was in a good place, they were working hard. I mean, you weren't getting people complaining about this or that, and they were making do with the space they had, and it just was a great atmosphere. A school system to be proud of. Thank you.
I'm sorry I missed it. As chair, I feel guilty that I couldn't
No.
make it, but that conference
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of put me
Well,
out
we
of it.
did see a younger Scobie.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they read me the riot act when I got home. They said, "How come you weren't there? Our teacher told us that you were coming."
He was very well behaved.
Your own
He
child,
was.
huh?
He's very
Yeah.
well behaved.
All right.
This is great.
Very cute.
Is that all we have
It
for new
was, yes,
business?
thank you.
We now move on to business and, oh, did you have a
Through the
question?
chair. Yeah,
I'm
it says
sorry.
that we have a meeting the 17th. Is that
Santa Claus show again.
still on, or?
Sorry, that's my mistake.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
No
That's
meeting
okay.
on the
I don't
17th?
even know if we had changed it by now.
Wayne?
Speaking of the 17th, I'd just like to bring up the Santa Collins Show again. We'll be on the 17th from 6 to 8 o'clock on cable. It's either going to be channel 191 or 192, and the phone number will be 5323, excuse me. And we're gonna, and Santa wants to hear from all you children. Thank you.
This is the real Santa.
Just the real one.
All right.
Oh, yeah, he comes to Auburn every year for the past
Perfect.
13 years.
All right. Mr. Barber, it's all yours.
Okay, through the chair, in front of you in your package, you'll find a listing of fiscal year 15 budget transfers. Included on this are actually, it's a two-page document this time. Page one is more or less for school committee information. It's relating to adjustments to our encumbrances, primarily for potentially penny changes and so forth for stipend amounts, salary amounts, as well as some other additional salary corrections that were made. On page 2 of the fiscal year 15 budget transfer sheet, for the first time for this fiscal year, we have a transfer that needs to go through an approval process. The reasoning why is that if you notice on page 1, all of the function codes for each of the transfers parallel each other. So there is no crossing of funds, for instance, from a salaried position to maybe a facilities department expenditure, which is a different function or series that needs to be accounted for. For the purpose of this section, the second transfer, what we are requesting is to transfer supplies from specialists, other stipends, instructional salaries, and from multiple schools into a funding to allow for 10 Swanson Road to purchase whiteboards. Through the chair, I'd like to request the transfer to be authorized or approved.
I would entertain a motion to approve the transfer between 2,000 and 4,000 series as requested by the business manager.
I make a motion to approve the transfer for the purchase of whiteboards.
Do I have
Second?
any conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. In addition, in your package, you'll see a listing, approximately 3 pages. This is a update for you for what we currently have available in all of the revolving accounts and the special fund accounts that we utilize within the school district. You'll see that they've been broken up, so you can see from the standpoint of our school lunch to our athletic receipts, our tuition receipts that we receive, or funds that we have for things such as our driver's education, our Mary D. Stone's kindergarten accounts. In continuation, you'll see that we have our other local receipts categories, such as our Auburn High School parking account, down through satellite accounts. And then on the third sheet, gives you an idea from our private grants and our gift accounts, also what we have currently in our current circuit breaker account, and then down below what we have in our other funds, such as our Medicaid accounts. Any questions?
Nope.
And then also, for information purposes, basically, we go through an update on our grants quarterly. And for those of you that have not been informed yet, we received, over the past couple of months, a MCAS remediation grant that was awarded by the state in an amount of $6,700 to the Auburn High School. And we also received the big yellow school bus grant in the amount of $200 that was issued to the Bryn Mawr School. We have several more that are in process right now, but they're currently literally in process where they were submitted and we're waiting for responses and so forth. But I'll keep you up to date in the upcoming school committee meetings. Any questions?
No questions?
Through the chair, if I just might ask,
Sure.
probably Dr. Brunel, what is the big yellow school bus grant?
That's actually a grant that's available annually. Generally comes in the amount of $200, and it helps to offset the cost for a field trip for
Oh.
transportation.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Alrighty.
Historically, you'll see a minimum of 2 of our schools that will actually
Yeah.
receive that over the course of the year at
Okay.
least.
Oh, thank you.
You can probably expect that shortly.
Yeah.
Do you have an additional question, Ms. Harrington?
Yeah, I was just curious, what are the rental fees for? It says Auburn High School rental fee, Mary D. Like,
Sure.
what's that?
For instance, there might be rental fees for our gymnasium that gets utilized for maybe an athletic department to be able to utilize it for a practice, or there might be other resources of field usage that we might have at the, for instance, let's use the high school. If we had a youth football program that hypothetically, or actually utilizes the football field and they rent that for us for the practice time, that would be where our rental fees would be
Okay.
coming to.
All right, thanks. Yes.
Just through the chair to add to that, what Mr. Barber had said, and we then use those funds as offsets to our operating budget, and we'll use them for maintenance and repairs at the schools, perhaps to purchase items to replenish.
Okay.
So we use them all as offsets.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. We have nothing under policies.
We do not
And we
this
have
evening.
no executive session.
Correct.
I would entertain a
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.